Good morning, and welcome to the latest in our series of BARB briefing events. I'm Justin Sampson, Chief Executive of BARB. It's my pleasure to set the scene for what is a celebration of the importance of people-based research. How does this celebration fit with the title of today's event, Making Sense of Big Data? Well, put simply, BARB's data vision is rooted in how we harness the power of big data and high quality panel data. And this is critical as we deliver the industry's gold standard measurement of what people watch. We strongly believe in the power of these two complementary sources working together, rather than in the attrition of arguments about whether data sourced from millions of devices is better than the insight that comes from a high quality panel of thousands of people that represent the breadth of our society. Our data vision, the power of panel data and big data, has underpinned the fundamental evolution of BARB's services over the last decade. When David Cameron became Prime Minister in 2010, our daily audience figures included live and consolidated 7-day ratings on the TV set. Now, in 2022, as we wait to find out who our next Prime Minister will be, we report live and post-broadcast viewing up to 28 days. We report pre-broadcast viewing for shows that are launched on BVOD services prior to appearing in linear schedule. We're not just restricted to viewing on TV sets, we report how people watch on tablets, PCs, smartphones. And we've recently extended our reporting to cover streaming services, SVOD, and video sharing platforms, with or without their participation. And this fundamental evolution in the insight that we deliver to you each day has been underpinned by a major transformation in how we collect and compile the data we report. And at the heart of this major transformation is the dovetailing of panel data and big data. Our nationally representative panel of homes is a vital source of insight into understanding people, and which is at the heart of BARB's remit. Alongside this, we capture a census level count of viewing to broadcasters' VOD services. Each and every day, these two sources are integrated using the Dovetail Fusion method. The census data provides great certainty on the volume of program viewing through BVOD services, while the panel data enhances the census data by telling us how many people and what type of people are watching. This morning, we will bring this to life for you. And to do this, I'm delighted to be joined by Katie Hartley of Dentsu, Lucy Bristowe of Sky, and Doug Whelpdale of BARB. But before we hear from Katie, Lucy, and Doug, let's hear a view from outside of our industry. Professor Tim Spector is not directly involved in the television and advertising industry, yet he knows a great deal about collecting and compiling data in a way that helps people make better decisions. And in that sense, we share a considerable amount of common ground with Tim. So please let me introduce Tim Spector.
Hello, my name's Tim Spector, and I want to tell you about the story of the ZOE COVID app and how big data brought help to millions of people. Now, this all started back in March 2020, when, if you remember, we were told to all go home, lock our doors, and not pester the NHS or our doctors. And on my cycle home from a meeting with the company ZOE that I co-founded with two entrepreneurs, where we've been looking at personalized nutrition, and we're just about to launch some more studies, I was quite depressed. So I came up with the idea of making that nutrition app into a symptom app that could be used by millions of people. And amazingly, 5 days later, the team at ZOE had done exactly that. They had produced a crude but very effective app that, with social media, we managed to spread the word to say, help COVID, help the NHS, and log your symptoms daily, and so we can get an idea of what was going on. And you've got to remember that at that time, there was nobody really logging who was getting the disease. There were no tests for months on the horizon, and everyone was very worried and depressed. And it turned out it was an amazing success. So within 24 hours, we had 1 million downloads, and we crashed the server. And by the end of the week, we had 2 million people just passing on the word. And it kept on going, and so that we actually ended up with over 4.5 million users in the UK alone. Also had some users in the US and Sweden. And even 2 years later, we still had nearly 1 million daily contributors who are still logging their symptoms every day. And with this, we were able to predict who was likely to get COVID from a small sample within there that we had great detail on that were being tested in the NHS. And we were getting huge volumes of data every day that from all these users ended up with over 800 million health reports, 30 million PCR tests, for example, and 1 million infections, over 2 million vaccines, over 40,000 long COVID cases. And this was an amazing success. And what we managed to achieve, I think, what I'm really proud of is the fact that no one else was collecting symptoms of COVID. Everyone said, oh, well, we know all about this. The government's doing it all, but they weren't. And they weren't in most countries. So we were able to add loss of smell to the official list of symptoms of COVID used by the WHO, as well as the UK. We highlighted things like skin rash as being really important predictors of infection. We looked at symptoms in the elderly and kids. We looked at long COVID, and we were one of the first to get 1 million people to tell us what their symptoms were of their first vaccine when people were really worried. And as the pandemic has progressed, we've managed to track the symptoms with all the different variants, leading us to keep pressing the government to change their boring symptom list, which really didn't reflect what was going on. And at the same time, we were doing science in super fast time. We had 40 scientific papers and 100,000 media articles. And videos like this were seen by millions of people. So it was an amazing story. And I think what I'm really proud about is that we also focused on how poor the UK diet is, and that diet quality was a real risk factor for severe COVID. And that was by mixing the database of diet with COVID severity. And we also looked at symptoms of colds for the first time, showing that this sort of app could be really useful in the future for tracking all kinds of respiratory viruses. And we're now transitioning this app into a health app. So we got 850,000 users of COVID to actually change their consent and give us permission to track any disease, so that we could start fighting cancer, dementia, mental health, and musculoskeletal diseases, which are the common concerns of people out there, by this daily tracking and this real citizen science. And I think this has really struck a chord. And with this database of 1 million people, we're able to recruit for trials to help pharma companies, do lifestyle interventions for epidemiology, look at new markers for cancer. But I think this app also has the ability to replace GPs potentially as a primary care app with all your information on there. And it could also be an incredible citizen science tool for everybody to do lifestyle interventions like skipping breakfast or exercising or sleeping a half an hour earlier. So I think this has taught us that people can use apps and trust them even if they're over 60 years old. So I think it's been incredible example of how data can really save lives.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Doug Whelpdale, and I'm very pleased to join you from BARB Towers this morning. Huge thanks to Professor Tim Spector for giving us some of his time there to talk about the amazing work that the ZOE study did during the pandemic and is still doing, indeed, as Tim mentioned. Obviously, what he was talking about was saving lives, and what we at BARB are talking about is not quite as important, no matter what you may have heard, but it is still very important to those of us in the industry to understand with great certainty and clarity the audiences that the programs that we're interested in are getting. I think what came through loud and clear from Tim's recording there was the centrality of what they did, of people being so central to what they were able to achieve, and the data that they were able to produce, which was so helpful to the government on top of what they were able to get from NHS directly and other organisations. Now, we're very fortunate at BARB that we've had much longer to hone our use of panel and big data. And one of the best examples that we see of the two sources coming together and showing us viewing figures is, of course, the phenomenon that is Love Island, which is currently back on ITV2, also available to view via the ITV Hub. And we've become used to seeing figures like this. So we've become used to seeing figures for the TV set for average audiences and average audiences across PCs, tablets, and smartphones. So our 4 screens that BARB are currently able to report audience figures for. We have become used to seeing this of roughly 3 million audience on the TV set and around about 1 million away from the TV set. But within an average audience, it is possible that people have watched on multiple devices. So we do include some potential for duplication of people within these average audience figures. Happily, what we're able to do, because of our nationally representative panel, is break out from these figures our unique audience on a TV set, our unique audience away from the TV set, so on tablets, smartphones, and PCs, and then the group of people who've watched on both. So they've watched either part of the same episode or different episodes. In this case, we're looking at all episodes within the first week, and we can see that there's this just over 500,000 group of people who watched on the TV and away from the TV set. And this is really crucial for our customers who want to understand reach and frequency so that they can understand unique reach in different places and where crossover exists and a true reach across 4 screens. Now, again, thanks to our panel, not only can we understand these figures, these top line figures, but we can understand what each of these parts of our audience are like and how they differ from one another. Now, if we take just the people, so the almost 1 million people who watched away from the TV set, so these are our non-TV only viewers, we can delve into what they're like. Now, I've obviously just taken a relatively top line look at them, and we can see that they're much more likely to be younger, they're more likely to be upmarket, and this audience is slightly more likely to be female. Now, with that, I want to hand you over to Katie Hartley from Dentsu Data Labs for her thoughts on the television data ecosystem.
So I guess the thing that strikes me about today's ecosystem, and really I mean, since the widespread adoption of connected sets, is just that as a channel, there really is a lot of different things going on, lots of different routes to access it, lots of different vendors, and that is all really positive because certainly the flow of data has never been so good. But at the same time, each of those constituent parts that make up that connected ecosystem are at this moment in time all fairly disparate. So if we think we've got the companies that either own the set-top boxes or have access to the screens using automated content recognition, so the likes of Samsung, Samba and Sky through Sky Glass. Then we've got the logged in apps from all the classic broadcasters on their VOD services and also YouTube. And again, that's all brilliant because they have that first party data and can provide us with TV viewing and ad delivery at a more granular level. But then there's also the other subscription VOD services like Netflix and Amazon, which can offer the same and are of course becoming more relevant to us now that they're also delving into that ad market as well. And also there's the other ad-funded VOD apps like Pluto and Rakuten, which will also have huge amounts of viewing data as well. But of course it's not logged in, so doesn't quite offer the same level of richness in terms of the who when it comes to viewing. And really it's undeniable that that data from all these different data partners is anything other than a massive enhancement for the channel. You know, and you think of all the amazing addressable opportunities that's opened up to us, as most famously pioneered by Sky with AdSmart. And of course, all that data opportunity becomes all the more compelling when linked to a brand's data via secure bunkers. And certainly for the Dentsu clients who've done this, we've seen really positive shifts in brand metrics. So we know that taking advantage of that big data is fruitful. But essentially all this wonderful stuff is taking place within walled gardens. So firstly, it's reflective of that user base, but not necessarily the population. And secondly, of course, none of it's deduplicated. So yes, the automated content recognition players can tell us if an ad has been played, but not exactly who is in the room. So we really still need that panel data as a parallel source to help us with that process of joining up the dots. And BARB is that data source with robust methodologies and, you know, has been known and trusted by all parts of our industry since the early 80s. I think at Dentsu, we're probably recognised as being big believers in the value of panel data, given that we have our own. Our Consumer Connections Survey, launched in 1999, so has almost as good at innings as BARB. And although we see that as our single source of truth for understanding people, we also understand that by marrying it with other data, we can further stretch its capabilities. And so we have various different fusions at play there. Our total TV proposition, for example, which simplifies that complex landscape we talked about up front, is only made possible by calibrating together several different data sources. For example, we can use that ACR data to identify where the natural delivery of our linear campaign has taken place and immediately calibrate this back to BARB to normalise it. We can then utilise the addressable capabilities of our BVOD and CTV partners to target the lighter viewing regions or audiences, but again, knowing that it isn't deduplicated, our data scientists are needed to create methodologies along with Dovetail and CCS to help us do that. And for reporting, we again turn to a panel such as BeatGrid to then deduplicate those results. So the principle that one data source in isolation is rarely the answer is already fairly natural to us. And at this moment in time, you know, unless there's a significant shift amongst those partners and the walls come down, as it were, then the future really has to be a hybrid of big data with panel data.
Many thanks to Katie there for giving us a view on, I think, quite how complicated the TV landscape is these days. Now, we might not be able to allow a full and complete view behind those walled gardens that Katie was talking about, but what we can allow our customers is a view over some of those walls into what's going on in the so-called walled gardens. One of the ways we can do that is to look at the top 20 programs for BVOD and SVOD services against one another. And I think this is one of the crucial points to this kind of data. So the data here are produced in a fair and equitable manner so that our users of the data can be sure that what the numbers that they're seeing can be directly compared to one another. And when we look at the top programs from BVOD and SVOD services in the second quarter of this year, we see a number of programs which have been creating plenty of buzz across our industry. Stranger Things tops the pile, and clearly there are a number of children of all ages who are still shouting again for Encanto as it comes second in this list. Equally clearly, there is a domination from SVOD services. So 16 out of these 20 titles are from Netflix, Disney Plus, or Amazon Prime. with just 4 from the broadcasters. Now, this might lead us to think that the SVOD services are becoming dominant in the market. But I think the crucial thing about producing equitable and fair data is that you can place everything in context. And when we place these viewing figures in the context of broadcaster viewing, including that which comes from a linear source, the picture is dramatically different. Before I show you that slide, I just wanted to comment quickly on Man versus Bee. So Man versus Bee is a new short series from Netflix, starring Rowan Atkinson as the hapless Trevor, who fights with a bee whilst house sitting in a luxury mansion. The reason I've highlighted this is because it's interestingly different content to generally that which we see. So every episode is quite short. The first episode is 19 minutes, but the subsequent 8 episodes are all 10, 11, or 12 minutes. Now back to context. Once we add in the linear version of viewing for all our broadcast channels, we see a dramatically different picture. So we're still looking across the second quarter of this year, but now we only see one entrant. So that first episode from series 4, Stranger Things on Netflix, coming in at 17th in our top 20. The rest of the list is programs from BBC, ITV, and Channel 4. Now, having looked fairly broadly across the programming that we've seen in the second quarter of this year, we can look more specifically. If we look at the third series of Afterlife, which dropped all in one go from Netflix, as has been their consistent policy with their content, we see a pattern which we've become used to. We see a large amount of viewing in the first few days after the content drops, and then we see that fall away as the content's been available for a longer period of time. And what we can do is, if we take all of this viewing, so what we have here is 28 days worth of viewing in this particular chart, we can see how much of that 28 days worth of viewing was accrued during the first 4 days. And for Afterlife Series 3, what we see is 45% of that total 28-day audience is accrued within the first 4 days of the content being made available to view. Now, Netflix are nothing if not flexible, and with Stranger Things, they did something different. You can quite clearly see here a big spike at the end of the chart. So episodes 1 to 7 were made available at the end of May, and then episodes 8 and 9 weren't released until the 1st of July. Now, clearly, we can imagine why they might have done this, given all the news around the subscription issues that they're facing. And it would certainly seem that viewers of Stranger Things did indeed wait and make sure that they tuned in for episodes 8 and 9. What we also see with this series of Stranger Things is that for the first 10 days after this show was released, viewing remains relatively consistent. And in fact, if we take a look again at the same figure as we did for Afterlife, so we roll up our viewing over the first 28 days and see how much of it came in the first 4 days, the figure is quite considerably lower. So only 31% of the 28-day audience was accrued during the first 4 days. Now, mercifully, I'm going to be quiet for a few more moments and hand you over to Lucy Bristowe from Sky to tell us how people are using our data.
Yeah, so at Sky, we're processing millions of data records every second and making good sense of that data from our set-top boxes. And this helps our customers to get more out of the content that they love, but it also helps us to make better decisions around the business and the outcomes as well. But our data is passive, so it doesn't involve any button pressing from viewers. It's all coming through as metadata to us. So what we use the BARB data for, we use it in 2 ways. Number one, we overlay the BARB data onto our passive data to give us better information about the break structures and when the spots are going out for linear TV. And we also use the BARB data to inform us around long viewing sessions, for example, and when it's likely that someone is no longer in front of the screen watching. So our passive data from millions of records is fantastic and rich, but we overlay that with BARB data to make it even better. So this year we launched C-Flight for broadcasters, which has been a key milestone for our industry, a collaboration between ITV, Channel 4 and Sky. C-Flight is quite a simple concept where we take linear TV commercial impacts from BARB, combined with the broadcaster video on-demand impressions that have been verified and audited, to produce total TV campaign coverage and frequency, simple to use, and it combines broadcaster information in a holistic way. It's a genuine example of a marriage between big data sets and BARB panel information. It's going really well with over 1,000 users within UK agencies who can see for the first time incremental reach from broadcaster VOD. Well, AdSmart is Sky's addressable capability that allows advertisers to target specific audiences with specific ads. From regions to sun seekers to home movers to new startups, we have thousands of segments our advertisers can choose to target with bespoke creative. Now, whilst AdSmart is driven by the granularity of the Sky dataset, BARB allows us to flag the AdSmart activity to ensure that no double counting has taken place in the linear currency. So last year we made a significant commitment to increase the size of the BARB panel to 7,000 homes, and in my career this has been the largest increase in panel size for BARB. We felt the commitment to get us a larger panel was well worth the investment, as audiences fragment and zero-rated spots increase. The increase in homes will help to reduce the variability but also give us a greater chance of success when linking big data sets like Sky to panel information. And this is a real milestone for BARB. It makes the future even more exciting as we think about bringing the benefits of rich census data together with the BARB panel information.
Thanks as ever to Lucy for giving us the benefit of her encyclopedic knowledge of BARB. I have heard that some of you may be seeing slight lags in the video. Apologies if that is the case. A recording of the event will be made available on our website, so you'll be able to view it then without any lagging, hopefully after the event. For my last section, I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about shared and solo viewing. I must thank PwC, whose analysis of BARB data made possible the SVOD half of the charts that you're about to see. Now, we know that there are many things which influence the particular programs or shows that people are watching at any given time. And I think whether one is one is alone or with friends and family is surely one of the biggest. I think there are reasons why we have cliches like people fighting over the remote in the family home. Now, what we're talking about here at a most basic level is how many people are in front of the screen. And in this case, we're talking about the TV screen. And we can boil that down to an average number of viewers per view figure. Now, for broadcasters, for the 4 weeks that were central to the month of May, that figure was 1.36. And for the big three SVOD players, so Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime Video, that was 1.5. Now, I appreciate that these figures can be a little bit abstract. Clearly, there are not fractions of people watching TV screens in the UK. A simpler way to think about this would be if we take the SVOD figure of 1.5, if we had 100 homes, in half of those homes, there would be 2 people watching that screen. This is, of course, a simplification. What this might lead us to think then is that we have more people watching broadcast content on their own than we have watching SVOD content on their own. I decided to test this theory by looking at the proportion of solo viewing among a number of popular genres. And the first one we looked at was quiz, panel, and game shows, and this seemed to back up what we were saying. So a greater proportion of that viewing from broadcasters was solo compared to the SVOD services. But for the other 4 genres we looked at, so preschool, crime and legal, factual, and sitcoms, we saw a greater proportion of solo viewing when viewing on SVOD services than when viewing via a broadcast channel. So what's going on here? This is a little confusing. It doesn't seem to back up the number that we saw on the previous slide. In this case, what we can do is look at the median viewers per view rather than the straight average, and we see something relatively revealing. For broadcasters, the figure, when we look at it in this way, is 1.12, and for the big three SVOD services is 1.06. Now, I appreciate that this is still fairly abstract. We're talking about the same genres, but we're still talking at quite a top line level, and we're talking about fractions of figures. So to make things a little bit clearer, I've decided to enlist the help of some friends. Here they are. Then they look incredibly young. But what we see when we analyze Friends, which you may well be aware of being available on Netflix and broadcast channels, is that we see a great deal more solo viewing to Friends on Netflix than we do when it's broadcast on Comedy Central Extra, or Channel 5. And with that comes the end of my section. So I'm just going to hand you back to Justin to close out today's session.
Thanks, Doug. And just to echo Doug's apologies for some of the technical glitches I think some of you might have been having in seeing the videos. I understand the audio was fine, so I blame it on the heat wave, but apologies that hasn't quite worked as we hoped this morning. When BARB launched, we launched in an era of data scarcity. That's clearly not the case anymore. We're now in an era of data abundance, and we're all being challenged on a daily basis to make sense of big data. And what we've tried to bring to life for you this morning is that big data are a vital part of BARB's future. But you can't make sense of the big data without high quality insights into what people do. And understanding people is at the heart of BARB's remit.
Think about panels for a moment. A current affairs programme will feature a politician or two on its panel. Talent shows use celebrities to pass judgment, while panels of famous chefs comment on the efforts of amateurs and professionals on cookery shows. At BARB, we run a panel too, although we're not only interested in the opinions of a select few. Our panel provides a trusted, objective view of the entire nation's viewing habits. And while we collect big data from devices, these don't reveal who's watching nor how many people are watching per screen. To truly understand viewing, it's critical to understand people. This is where our panel comes into its own. It's a sample of carefully recruited households, selected by geography, demographics, and TV platforms to mirror the entire UK. It's continuously vetted and managed too. Each week, we interview 1,000 households to see if the profile of the current panel is, well, current, and tweak our data weighting accordingly to ensure we accurately reflect the nation. And with the media moving so quickly, we're evolving too. We're expanding the panel to 7,000 households, which is about 16,000 people, providing daily insight into who's watching what, on which device, and for how long. So whatever you do in the media industry, our gold standard currency is here to give you the trusted and rigorous intel you need to guide your decisions. BARB, the ultimate television panel, which you'll never see on TV.
So we've been celebrating the power of the panel this morning and how it can work effectively with big data to deliver richer insights that can instill greater confidence in the day-to-day decision-making process. Here are some headlines I've taken away from our great contributors this morning. Tim Spector talked about the power of real-time information collected from real people, what he called citizen scientists. And we heard how the evidence collected by ZOE was hugely influential in informing decision-making and communications throughout the pandemic. Katie Hartley from Dentsu brought to life the era of data abundance that we're now in and the opportunities this creates around addressable advertising. And taking advantage of first-party data is really fruitful, yet she rightly highlighted limitations when it comes to joining up the dots and in particular understanding deduplicated reach. Panel data like BARB's are crucial to make sense of big data. And Lucy Bristowe talked about the millions of data records Sky is processing every second, so it can help its customers get more of the content they love. Equally, she highlighted how these are passive data and how BARB has been used to enrich Sky's first-party data for many years. And now BARB data are a critical ingredient of C-Flight, the collaboration between commercial broadcasters to deliver deduplicated campaign reach and frequency across linear and BVOD campaigns. And Doug Whelpdale showed how BARB's contribution to panel data and big data delivers the insight needed by the industry. We saw the incremental reach a program like Love Island can get from devices other than the TV set, how our panel can provide insight on audiences to shows on walled gardens, such as Stranger Things on Netflix, and the importance of the panel to understanding how much people are watching as part of a shared experience, or if they're more likely to watch on their own. A big thanks to all of you for taking time to join us this morning as we celebrate the strength of our panel in making sense of big data. The event will be available for catch-up viewing on our website later. If you have any questions, please do follow up with Doug, with me. Our email addresses are on the screen, or indeed your regular contact at BARB. And we welcome your feedback to this morning's event through completion of a short questionnaire that we'll send you shortly. Here's hoping you have a great day, and in the words of the immortal Fonzie, stay cool. Bye-bye.